Saturday, March 27th, the final Saturday in March. And if you have started to see a lot more activity around this Texas legislature, the 87th Texas legislature, it's because there is. There's a lot more activity. There's a lot more happening. When March 12th came and the filing deadline for new bills to be filed was over, and there can no longer be new bills filed, committees in the Texas legislature, both on the Senate and the House side, really ramp up their hearings and really start moving legislation forward, getting things passed out of committee and people giving testimony around that stuff. And so that shift that happened after March 12th is what you're seeing right now. A lot of movement, a lot of bills, a lot of conversations, some hearings going through to the midnight, wee hours of the morning, and so much going on. So we're excited to be here with you. Jason Sugg, our Twitter commander-in-chief. Jason, how are you doing this Saturday?
I'm good. A little slow this morning, but pretty good.
Yeah, a lot going on. Normal day-to-day life still going on too, and then the whiplash of the Lege is happening. And so, Jason, you've got some tweets that we're going to dive into so people know the news of the week. Let's go for it.
All right. Like Alex said, there's been a lot happening this week, so we are gonna just dive right in and highlight a few things here. First one we wanted to hit was this bill that passed out of committee this week, SB 29. So that's on the Senate side. We'll be getting a House version, no doubt, soon. And this is one of a raft of bills across the nation that Republicans have been introducing to ban kids, transgender kids, from playing on sports teams for their identified gender, right? They're saying biological sex has to be the determinant. And of course, this creates all kinds of problems. I mean, you're setting these kids up to be, not only are you setting these kids up to be bullied and whatnot, you're setting up ways that kids are going to they're going to have their sex, their gender interrogated by some authority figures around this. And it's terrible, really, and kind of cruel. And it's happening.
Yeah, and we see the language around this to try to help people understand, like, there's a collection of legislation. Equality Texas has done a good job organizing all of this, and we have their stuff linked on our website that we have available for everyone too. But it's really looking at this collection of legislation as the new bathroom bill 3.0. It's all of these different ways they're trying to discriminate and negatively impact transgender kids, transgender community, their families, and then all of us as well. And so the other term you're hearing is show me your genitals. This legislation is all around show me your genitals, and there's a great information around that. And I want to give a huge shout out to our LGBTQIA plus huddle lead, Ash, and they have been doing a great job giving testimony, but also for us as an organization, helping us understand the nuances of this. And so when you see legislation focusing, for example, on the birth certificate, that is a retroactive show me your genitals, because the way doctors establish what they're going to put on the birth certificate is looking at the genitals of that baby. And so that's where this is all geared to just discredit, to marginalize transgender kids, because we know that choice, gender choosing, and the choices that people make, and the decisions that they make, if they want to modify their birth certificate, if they want to go through any of those changes, then the state is trying to make it to where they won't recognize that, because it has to be the day you were born. What was it put on there? And that may not be accurate.
Right.
And so this is just a way of trying to discriminate against this community, but it puts everyone at risk. It puts every kid at risk, because a coach or anybody can call out a kid And that embarrassment and that trauma is just completely unnecessary. And we know, like we've seen with the mask mandate, we've seen with how we've handled this pandemic, there's unfortunately pockets of our community that will do whatever they can to only satisfy themselves and are not trying to look out for others. And this is an example where the abuse around this kind of legislation would be horrible.
Yep. Right. Right. And we should mention, I mean, this was a Senate bill, of course, and part of Dan Patrick's, who's the lieutenant governor and head of the Senate, part of his strategy always is to gin up these kind of culture war issues. And so every session we come back to this issue about how can we beat up on trans kids a little bit more, because it rallies their base, unfortunately. This did pass out of committee to the Senate. Like I said, there'll probably be a House version at some point, so we'll have another opportunity to push back on it. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be keeping an eye on it and passing our information on. Oh yeah, I just wanted to highlight too that medical organizations are coming out and saying that this definition of sex is not supported by medical science. That this is a complicated issue about gender and these kind of simplistic ways of trying to like invasively determine it for people are really like there's no support for it.
Yeah, and that's, I jumped a little ahead, Jason, on before this tweet. We identified this exactly what Ash has provided to organizers within our group and also to the public and all the great work that they are doing in Texas, and the whole community of people who are working on this particular issue and this legislation is that, this acceptance of the birth certificate is really problematic, and we need to really understand that particular piece of this. And so to hear from the medical community is just, further validation. We need to really understand what this kind of legislation is doing and why we shouldn't be supporting it.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on, we just, there was some numbers that got released this week from the Texas Department of State Health Services saying that 111 people had died in the winter storm. And I think this is an important number to keep in mind because, 111 is a tragic number in its own right. But the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is the focus on some voting rights suppression bills, which are being justified by talking about voter fraud, of which there's only been, over the last 15 to 20 years, there's only been 150 cases prosecuted in Texas of this. We've had 150 people die of gun violence in the last 2 years. We've had 111 people die recently in this winter storm that isn't really getting addressed. And, there are far more pressing issues that we could be spending our precious legislative time on rather than the things that they're spending them on.
Right. And this is where we need people to understand that the Lege is designed for us to not be able to address all the things we need to address. It is every 2 years. It's for 140 days. And those first 60 days, nothing is really happening to move legislation. Legislation is getting filed. There's conversations that are happening, advocacy is happening, but then, it comes down to, less than 80 days for there to be public testimony, for there to be hearings, for there to be, movement in the process of getting legislation passed. And this really causes such a chaotic environment to where there's so much happening all at once. It truly is inadequate in terms of how we can address all of the needs we need to address in Texas. And when you have a crisis like the Texas freeze, it starts getting pushed aside and it is not in the forefront of what we need to do. And so while we want to fix the way the Lege works, and we want to get rid of these constraints because of the way the system is, we have to understand that this is the system it is right now. So it is so important for Texans to understand you have to take action. And it is unfortunately a daily thing, but a lot of these things can be done within 5 or 10 minutes. But this is how we keep issues relevant. This is how we are able to get things focused on. 111 Texans dying during a preventable winter storm is a horrendous thing that happened in our state, and is something that we have to actively continue to work for solutions on.
And the Texas Lege isn't going to focus itself. We have to be on it and pushing them.
Exactly.
Another thing going on this week we wanted to highlight was the George Floyd Act. This was an act that's meant to reform police to a limited degree in Texas, especially around their violent behavior towards people at times. This is in committee at this point. There were hearings earlier this week. We have an action on it that I'm going to highlight here. We don't have a tweet for it, but and this says act by Thursday, March 25th, but it's still sitting in committee. It hasn't been voted out yet. So this action is still good. Go call your people. Let them know that you want to see this get passed out.
Right, and that's a part of the process we'll see. It's scheduled, so that's where that Thursday, March 25th, it was scheduled to be heard in the committee, and it has the potential to be voted on. So it's voted out of committee, so that then it goes to the House floor, the full, House chamber to be voted on would be the next step after that. This bill is still pending in the committee, so that's why we want to continue to keep encouraging those committee members to go ahead and let's support this. Let's get it moving in the process, because there's a lot of good things, as we mentioned in our website, where bans chokeholds, requires officers to intervene or render aid if they see another officer using excessive force, and ends arrest for non-jailable fine-only offenses. And so there's a lot of good things in reform that are in the George Floyd Act.
Yep. And now, one last, when there's some gun control stuff, Mom's Demand is doing some great work on this. Sorry, my cat is Scarlet the cat. Mom's Demand is doing some great work here in Texas, pushing back on these bills. But there were 4 different permitless carry bills in the Lege this week. So just wanted to give a shout out to them, and thank you for, these volunteers were down there all day long to testify against these bills, and it's great to see that happening.
Absolutely. Definitely another area, key space that we need to have improvement on. And this imagery of this is an example of what kind of efforts it takes for Texans to make sure that their priorities and issues are heard. It's so unfortunate that in a pandemic, we don't have virtual testimony as an option. And there are still people willing to go to the Capitol who have been vaccinated or feel comfortable with the measures in terms of staying safe. But we know so many Texans are not. And so this is where the legislature is really failing us here in Texas, because these important bills and issues are not being heard from nearly as many people as they should be.
Yep. And again, going back to that number, right? 150 cases of voter fraud over the last 15 to 20 years in Texas. And we're spending huge amounts of committee time on it. 150 people in the last 2 years killed in mass shootings in Texas. And we're getting bills that make it easier for people to purchase and use guns. So I wanted to turn now to probably our biggest highlight today. There's dueling bills in the House and the Senate, SB 7 in the Senate, HB 6 in the House, that are similar. It's this chipping away at the edges of voting rights kind of thing. So they're getting rid of 24-hour voting that they had in Harris County and Houston in the last election. There's some ridiculous provisions about if you have a disability and you want to use mail-in voting, that you have to provide proof of your disability, which essentially amounts to a poll tax I mean, especially, I mean, a lot of people who are disabled, like it's really hard for them to get around on public transit or whatever. And so to have to go to a doctor's office, get a certification and bring that back and pay for the doctor's office visit is, I mean, it's unconstitutional, really. And this law will no doubt, if it passes, be wrapped up in the courts for a while. And of course, this also echoes what's going on in Georgia this past week, where they passed a very restrictive law that did some crazy things, like outlawed bringing water and food to people who are standing in line to vote, and gave the Republican-controlled state government the ability to seize control of local elections from Democratic boards, like county boards. And the bill here is similar with some of those things, where there's some real targeting of there's requirements to like have the same number of voting machines in every polling location, regardless of how many people are using it. So if you have a suburban location that has a smaller number of people, and you have a downtown location that has a huge number of people, they have to have the same number of voting machines, which is, so this is a way of decreasing, making it harder for people in urban areas to get out and vote. And of course, we know who that primarily focuses on, right? Communities of color and Democrats. So our first tweet here was Now This, which is a group that does these very informative videos, has a video with Lina Hidalgo, who's the county chair of Harris County. And it got picked up and retweeted by Leonardo DiCaprio, so hopefully it's getting some attention out there. And she does a great job of laying out what's in this bill, why it's a bad idea, regardless of your political affiliation. It makes it harder to vote whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent. And there's just no good reason for it. Like, it doesn't address an issue. 150 cases over the last 15 years, 10 cases a year, and we're locking this down with these kinds of restrictions versus dealing with the other issues that are out there.
And as was shared in the House Elections Committee meeting, our own state, the Texas Secretary of State, did an investigation into our elections and have said that our elections are secure. There is no real big threat around voter fraud. There's no evidence of this right now. And the response that the Elections Committee Chair, BriscoeCain, had, well, I've seen polls and people feel like we should be doing better. And in all honesty, one instance is too much. And so we should do all of these things to not address any problem they're trying to address, but simply just to restrict voting. And so their method to address voter fraud is to not have voters. Is essentially their strategy.
Right.
And we have seen it from both sides of the political aisle in all of these different levels of looking at our voting and election system, that it is secure. Voter fraud is minimal, as you've been pointing out, Jason. It is not even anything that is going to turn a race or anything like that. There are very, very, very few instances of this happening, that this kind of effort is not about solving that problem. It is about reducing the people who vote. Yeah. And a lot of people like to look at Georgia because they were able to elect 2 Democratic senators that would help the U.S. Congress Senate, to where the Democrats have the majority, with the belief that there's going to be legislation that's going to be passed with Democratic priorities. And that makes people excited and happy. And they want to see those kind of things in Texas. This is where people need to understand the state legislature is a whole nother thing. And although Georgia had those kind of victories that people want to celebrate, the state legislature just passed bills that are going to restrict the vote in Georgia, and Texas is following suit. And so we need to be involved with our state legislature. We need to understand what our state legislature is doing, because at the end of the day, they are going to make huge impacts on our lives. And a lot of people don't even know it's happening.
Yeah.
And so if we want to stop this, we must get engaged today. Call the elections committee for the House, call your own representative, call your own senator, and let them know that HB 6 and SB 7 are not bills you want passed. And you have to continue to engage.
Yep.
Send them an email, call them, reach out to 5 people in your network, which we call Rapid Response 5, and let's make sure we are taking action on this.
Yep, absolutely. Right. And multiple sources have said that the 2020 election in Texas and nationwide was the most secure election in history. So this is not an issue that we need to be spending time on. It's a waste of our legislative time. It's a waste of dollars. And there are far more pressing issues for us to be addressing. We have an action on this. This action talks about HB 6 and SB 7. SB 7 passed out of committee this week. HB 6 is not yet, for some reasons we're going to get into in a moment. So there's still time to take action on this, even at the committee level. And of course, you want to take action on it. Whoever your senator and representative are, to let them know before this gets to the whole Senate floor, the whole House floor, that you want them to oppose it. So we've got an action up on that with Antoinette explaining how you can do this. Great video. Take a look.
And follow us on YouTube, because we have almost daily calls to action right now because of the way the Lege is happening. And you can see the actions that we're doing. We give a brief description, model what you can say if you need some guidance there. But these calls, when you call committee members, you call your representative and your senator, will take less than 10 minutes. And even less time if you want to just send them an email. But the key is that we need you to do it. You've got to take action, because our representatives and our senators need to hear from Texans why they're opposing something or why they're supporting something. And in this case, like Jason said, we are absolutely opposing HB 6 and SB 7, and we truly need every single person to participate in that opposition.
Yep. Wanted to highlight some things about the hearings on this week, especially in the House. It was kind of a clown show. I think we need to be pointing out these parliamentary things that are happening that are shady at best. There's a tradition in the Texas Lege that members of the legislature are allowed to come and question bills. Representative Collier showed up to question a Black woman representative, we should say, to a committee that doesn't have any Black members. She showed up to ask some questions, was shut out of that process, told that she could get in line to testify with everybody else there. It kind of like, it highlights how much they're trying to keep this under wraps. Like, that's their MO, right? Like don't draw attention, slip these things under the covers, and then it's a done deal.
And this was such a critical moment in the hearing, because for the hearing, the author is Chairman BriscoeCain, Representative BriscoeCain. And so he had given the gavel and the chair responsibilities to the vice chair so that he could answer questions, because the committee members can ask questions about the bill that he, the author, could answer. And so not allowing his fellow colleagues like Representative Collier to be able to come in to ask those questions as a way of trying to shut that down is so obvious. When you look at the footage, which others have highlighted, we're going to look to try to highlight that on our platforms here this weekend. When you look at that footage, it is absolutely horrendous how intentional it was not to address Representative Collier, Chairwoman Collier, because she chairs her own committee. and it was not just one time, and so then there was this, thing that happened within the elections committee hearing that was unprecedented, really.
Yep. And we should say BriscoeCain, named by Texas Monthly as Texas's worst legislator, who has been put in charge of this committee by Speaker Dade Phelan. And we got to wonder what kind of deal went on to make that happen. Because we saw this week that this guy doesn't have a clue what he's doing. So why is he running this committee?
Yeah, truly has no clue. And yes, I'm glad you brought up Dade Phelan, Jason, because Speaker Dade Phelan, really, this is on him as well for making this appointment that really had no business of being made. And so what is Speaker Dade Phelan's, which Representative Collier had vouched for. Representative Collier, when the nominations for Speaker were brought up, had spoken positively about Speaker Dade Phelan, but then for him to make a choice like BriscoeCain to head the elections committee, and for that kind of ineptitude and just inadequacy to be present over this kind of legislation, Dade Phelan is somebody that bears apart some of this responsibility of what's happening in our legislature.
Yep. And just to go into a little bit, the Texas Civil Rights Project had a great tweet about what's in HB 6. And in particular, the way that this bill really disproportionately hits communities of color and the disabled and people who vote by mail. And also highlights, this is an important fact, that 72% of the cases that Paxton's office has prosecuted for voter fraud have been Black people or community or people of color. And so this is a issue that has like huge racial overtones to it. I mean, because of obviously the history, and it seems kind of intentional that it's meant to target these communities. They're trying to keep them from voting, right?
Absolutely intentional, and the horrible thing is that intent is there, but also that the ramifications of this type of bill passing is that it's going to impact every community to in order to be able to vote. It's going to disproportionately affect communities of color, which is what their goal is, but it also will affect every voter in Texas. So every voter in Texas should be calling for this legislation to just die, because this is not how our democracy is going to stay functional and how we are going to be able to move forward in our democracy. This is completely, anti-democracy, and is something that we need to stop in Texas here from being able to thrive and let this happen.
Right. Absolutely. And there were other shenanigans in the committee hearings. This hearing, there were a couple hundred people who had lined up to testify. Many of them have driven from all across the state to be there for this hearing because they're not doing virtual hearings, even though COVID's here. And the committee hearing wound up falling apart on a technicality. BriscoeCain, who self-described parliamentary guru, had
formerly self-described. He took that off his Twitter description.
He recessed the meeting without setting a time to return, and then when they came back, I guess the rules were that they weren't allowed to reconvene that day. Convenient, given that he had all these people lined up to testify against his bill. So I mean, it's comic, right? Almost, if it wasn't so tragic. Texas Civil Rights Project has some more information if you want to go to this tweet on this. In light of that, the hearing has been rescheduled for next week, next Thursday, April 1st, at 8 a.m. So if you can get to the Capitol next week to testify against this, it would be great. They're clearly jiggling things to try and like reduce the visible opposition to the bill. But and you see Beto here because he had driven all the way from El Paso to testify against this. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was a concern, because the concern was that BriscoeCain was going to be able to just call a hearing with minimal notice, and people were calling out that you need to give the public plenty of notice so that they can so that they can participate and they can be there in attendance and make the drive, whatever they have to make. So it is fortunate that we are going to get the hearing on Thursday. It gives people time. We do have notice for it. But these are the kind of shenanigans that happen and the tactics that are being used that we have to be concerned about, because they will use these tactics to help bad legislation move forward. So April 1st, we have the opportunity, take action leading up to this date. And like Jason said, if you can be there in person, if you feel safe, you have the vaccine already, or if you just feel safe, you can be there, then please show up to give testimony.
Yep. On the other side, on the Senate side, SB 7 did pass out of committee. It's going to the full Senate floor now. I don't think we have a date on that vote yet, but there's still time to oppose it. Please call your senators and tell them to vote against it. Again, Beto came from El Paso to testify against these this week, and good on him for that.
Yeah, and this is something that we need to see modeled a lot more. And so big kudos to Beto for doing this. Any Texan can go testify. And that's the key here, that you can sign up. Any Texan can call their representative or senator. Any Texan can email them. Us participating is something that we need to see as something that's acceptable and that's available. And so that's where we want to continue to let people see and show them how they can take action. So big kudos to Beto for showing that to everybody, of how you can go up and give testimony and have your voice heard and be a part of the process.
And I love that he highlighted this, that instead of working to constrict democracy, we should be passing laws that are expanding it, right? Automatic voter registration, it would be a huge boon, just to make it easier. Like, why do we have this crazy 2-tier process for being able to vote? And there are a lot of other reforms that we can, someday we're going to have here, but we need you all to get out and push against this right now. And this week in our ongoing watch on indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton, we had his office is pushing back against open records requests for emails and texts sent while he was in Washington for the January 6th insurrection. And he, of course, doesn't want to hand them over, even though he's required to by law. Not that being required to by law has ever been a constraint on Ken Paxton.
Yeah, the law is optional for our indicted investigation, FBI investigation.
Our Attorney General, who's tasked with enforcing the laws, and everybody else. So this has been up this week as well. And so, give his office a call. If you're looking for something to do, give his office a call and demand that he release these records. The public has a right to know what his involvement in this was. On a more humorous note about him, Indivisible Texas Lege and me personally have been blocked by Ken Paxton on Twitter. I'm imagining a number of you have also. A clever journalist who had been impacted or who'd been blocked by Ken Paxton came up with this idea this week of having Ken Paxton bot. So you can follow that on Twitter, KPaxBot, if you have been blocked like us. And it just takes screenshots of all his tweets and tweets them out, which I find great. This is
this is the way journalists and just people in general are having to do, because we have elected officials like Ken Paxton that do not want to engage with the public and find any reason to circumvent their constituents and to avoid having to be held accountable. And so we wear that with a badge of honor. The Indivisible Text Ledge is one of the probably thousands of organizations and people that have been blocked by Attorney General Ken Paxton. And we always like to say, you know, he may block us on Twitter. We're going to do everything we can to block him at the ballot box come 2022. So join us in getting Ken Paxton out of Texas and out of the seat of Attorney General.
Yep. Yep. And into a courtroom being prosecuted where it belongs.
Yep.
Last item today, I just want to highlight this action that we have. There's some bills that would be expanding charter school rights, removing local oversight over in terms of where charter schools are located and that kind of thing. And we're asking people to push back on that. And let's keep public education public.
Absolutely. There are a lot of efforts with public education. We had progress last legislative session with House Bill 3, which increased funding for public education and provided some solutions to help public education. And now we're seeing in this legislative session different ways that they're trying to hurt public education. And one of the ways they're trying to hurt public education is this expansion of charter schools, because charter schools do not have school district boards like independent school districts. And so they are a hybrid of public dollars and private dollars. And it's a way of pulling these resources from the public education system that we have. And Texas has an obligation within its constitution to provide free public education. And so this is something that people who want to make money off education, who want to use this as a marketplace to get rich, are doing everything they can to insert themselves. And at the end of the day, it is not about serving the children of Texas. It's not about educating the children of Texas. It's about how they can make money off of this. And so these are different ways that we can push back. And the other method, which is SB 1365, is the TEA takeover. So the Texas Education Agency has been trying to take over Houston ISD for a while. And they want more power to be able to take over not only just Houston ISD, but any ISD. And so Commissioner Morath has not been a consistent ally for public education and has continued to help elevate charter schools and charter school expansion, even expanding during the pandemic when we knew that public education needed more resources because of the pandemic. And so this is where there are multiple efforts for education, public education, to be negatively impacted. So add your voice, be a part of this. Let our elected officials or legislators know that we want to invest in public education and oppose these two bills.
Yeah, what Alex said. That's all I've got today. We'll be back next time with the ongoing drama of the Texas legislature on Twitter here.
Absolutely. Stay tuned, everybody. Continue to follow us on our platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Visit our website. Make sure you have it bookmarked. We have a CTA tracker now because of the number of actions we're asking Texans to take part in. There's a link in our post for that. So you can click on our CTA tracker, jump into one of those actions. Let us know you completed it. So that way we can continue to make progress here in Texas for a better and brighter future. And so we're looking to potentially do this weekly. So be on the lookout. We'll keep giving you what's going on in the ledge.
Yep. Thanks for being here, y'all.
Bye, everybody.